Hey everyone, it's Mark. Thanks for joining me today. I've been thinking for a while that I'd like to sit down and record and make some more content. I enjoy making the podcasts or the videos if you're watching on YouTube, but just have not been able to figure out how to squeeze it into what's been a fairly busy lifestyle, mostly with work over the last 6 months or so. But just recently, it's sort of getting back to normal. And I have an opportunity to slow down a little bit and create a little bit more content. And so I've had on my mind that I wanted to get this done for you guys. And now all of a sudden, there's all sorts of things to talk about anyway. And so this seems like a good time to be sitting down to make this because after I spend maybe an episode or two just sort of updating you on what I've been doing for the last couple months that's been keeping me so busy. Some of it's really interesting. And then I want to get into what's going on with the tariffs, which now, as I record this today, it's April 22nd. Right now, it's just 10% tariffs from the entire globe, plus the tariffs on China, which I think are 125%. And so this is definitely, without question, going to be a disruptive event within our industry. A tremendous amount of what we buy comes from China. There will not be easy alternatives for much of that. And to the extent where it exists, capabilities to buy replacements from other countries that might have lower tariffs than China, to the extent that that exists, those resources are going to be enormously strained and unable to keep up with the demand because China is producing just a tremendous percentage of the goods that we're receiving. The brushes, the rollers come to mind, all the hand tools, the extension poles. We're about to learn a whole heck of a lot about where our products come from and how these tariffs are going to impact us. I wanted to just sort of update you on what I had been doing lately, but I'm not always so comfortable just sitting here sort of waxing poetic about my life. It's easy for me when I'm just reporting news or if I'm doing a particular piece of content like some of the Gassenheimer stuff. But just to sit here, I wanted to share with you, sort of what I've been working on and stuff like that. I'm not so comfortable just doing that sort of one-off. And so I asked a friend of mine to join me to record what I think is going to be a quick 5 or 6 episodes. As I'm recording this introduction, actually, we already have three of them recorded. In a minute, you're going to meet my friend, Steve Rice. Steve and I first met when we sat for the NACE certification, the NACE 3 certification, which I'm assuming would have been the peer review, but no, I don't remember back that far. It was 20 or 5 or so years ago. And he picked up and has been following on and off since then. And more recently, now he's retired, has more time, and he was following more regularly. And so he and I just started chatting from that. A little friendship popped up. He's a big baseball fan and has a lot of interest and experience in the paint industry. And so he's agreed to do these with me. And this first episode really starts to talk about the tariffs. And the episode itself would have been recorded a couple of days ago, maybe April 20th or so. And so a lot of this information I do understand is going to change. Please, as you're interacting with this, please make sure that you're always checking the dates. And, obviously this can't be updated. I'll just, other than creating new content where the circumstances to change. So just make sure you're keeping it fresh in that way. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the tariffs, and we're going to talk a little bit about this really cool tour that I just took across the United States, spending a lot of time in paint stores, introducing a client of mine, a consulting client, who you're about to hear a little bit more about. And probably in a few months, you're going to start hearing quite a bit more about. A consulting client of mine who is initiating operations in the United States and was looking for their first introduction to the market. And so we had arranged about 2 weeks of traveling across the United States with their executives. I don't want to get into too much of the detail here because Steve and I go into it in a second, but just what that experience was like and sort of what I was seeing in the stores and what people are talking about. And so let's jump right into that. And thanks so much for listening. Well, thanks everyone for joining me today. And let me start by introducing you to my good friend Steve
Yeah, there
Rice,
you go.
and
Perfect.
he has agreed to sit with me for a couple episodes and talk a little bit of paint and see what comes out of us. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for asking me again. Those who might have watched last year, we were together on the NACE episode, and then another
That's
one or
right.
two after that. So it,
We met at NACE 20 odd years ago.
yeah, 20 something years ago in Philadelphia on our NACE 3, and we had lunch, and you were writing the column in the decorating retailer at the time,
Yep.
and so we kind of became fast friends, and then reacquainted through your blog. I would follow that, and we connected, and so here we are. So it's good to be back with you.
And it's great to see we haven't checked in a few weeks. I've been away. I know I told you about this trip that I had planned
Yeah,
for this one client that I'm working with right now. And so I know we were talking about what we might talk about, and I thought it'd be interesting to start with just that trip and the gigs that I have going on right now.
yeah, that'd be great. I know you and I have texted back and forth a little bit on that,
Yeah.
but I'd love to have you fill in the details.
So one of the jobs that I have going on right now is with this international manufacturer of applicators. And I have to say it like that because they're still asking for privacy, although that's probably going to come to an end in the
Hmm.
next just 60 or 90 days or so.
Oh, good.
And what they did was hire me about 2 years ago to help them establish operations here in the United States. And we've been working since then, sort of to do that. We started a couple of years ago. You remember you were on that focus group call with us. That was just about
Right.
2 years ago now,
Yeah.
getting some information from dealers, learning what it was that they needed in an applicator line, going out, testing the products that were currently available in other markets. Like I said, they're an international company, testing them with American coatings, testing them in the American. We're here can be
Hmm.
quite varied in terms of temperature and stuff. As that progressed, finding as many opportunities as we thought. And so we sort of continued that process, looking for people to help us distribute, looking for prospective customers, looking for anything, right? They have nothing in the United States. And so that process has been going on for about a year and a half, and it led to last month about a 3 week tour across the United States for me. We started in New York. We headed out west, stopped in some major cities along the way, ultimately ending up in Los Angeles. And all along the way, we met with dealers in some cases, dealers who had expressed interest and were interested just from the focus group, as well as other sort of more strategic partners. They're looking for distributors, they were looking for perhaps even somebody to develop a warehouse for them. They weren't quite sure exactly what their strategy was going to be there. And so within that representation and all the things that somebody who wants to sell products into our segment needs,
Yeah.
if they currently don't have it, then just imagine trying to fill in all those blanks. And so
Right.
we did that for a few weeks, and it was an outstanding experience for me to be in that many paint stores in a row, to see that kind of presentation of the paintbrush, and looking at it in its minutia like that.
Yeah.
But that experience right before these tariffs,
Yeah.
that experience right before these tariffs, which is I think what we're going to talk about now,
Right.
is was really just eye-opening, because I had feel like I'd had this huge study session on sort of the humble paintbrush. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden it becomes news because of the tariffs the United States has imposed on basically the entire world, which is going to change dramatically. We said that a little bit uh, as we prep for this, is going to have a very dramatic change and
Yeah.
will be instantly noticeable in the American and the Canadian paint stores.
Right. So before you get into the heavy topic of the tariffs, I'm just kind of curious, as lifetime paint store guys, how is it getting back into dealers' stores and seeing their stores and talking to some shop, and did it kind of bring
Yeah,
back a lot of great memories,
I love it.
or do you feel
Yeah.
like, I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore?
Well, both actually,
Yeah,
both. That's a great question because it's
uh-huh.
both, right?
Yeah,
I had lost interest my last few years. Not such an
yeah,
unusual story for the old men and women, that have been doing the same thing for 35 years. I
right.
admit to dragging my ass for the last few of them, but the truth is, I enjoyed my career.
Yeah,
I certainly enjoyed the people that I worked with during my
absolutely.
career, and so yeah, it's great to be back in paint stores and also to look at them critically from a different perspective than I had before. Because even though in my head I'm a peer,
Hmm.
in my heart I'm a peer, but I'm there not really as a peer, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm there like sort of critically looking at how they're displaying applicators in the case of this trip. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I thought it was like a
Yeah.
new perspective on an old friend.
Sure. Yeah, it is an old friend. When I retired 2 years ago, I considered for a little while maybe like just working at Home Depot, picking up just to keep my head in the game and my hand on a paint can.
Yep, you
And
got to keep your paint skills sharp.
yeah, but it's just like you say, as kind of the year and the second year go by, and I'll go into Home Depot to pick up something for a little electrical project, and I walk by the paint department, and I'm just like, no, that was then.
Yeah. And
And
and we did spend a fair amount of time in Home Depots. We went
yeah,
into Lowe's, we went into Menards. We were all over the country, and
uh-huh,
they had not ever been into an American Paint store.
ah,
And so it wasn't just the prospective distributors who we were going to visit.
mm-hmm,
uh, it wasn't just the prospective customers that we were going to visit. It was also an introduction, sort of to the American paint
of the whole
market
market.
in
Yeah,
general. Sure, sure.
yeah, yeah, very
And
cool.
so, yeah, we did. We had a really cool time, and I had never really done that from the
Mm-hmm,
perspective of a manufacturer. And so, as we were going store to store and seeing the different brands that they carry, they always checked country of origin, which
yeah,
is not the sort of thing you and I would have looked at when cruising around
right,
a paint store.
yeah,
But they always up, there's a double off the wall. Oh, and an error in center field because the Yankees cannot field again this year. They're
yeah,
like number 20. They're like the 20th worst fielding team.
and fielding. Oh my goodness.
Awful,
Yeah,
awful, awful, awful. Anyway, we were talking about tariffs basically the entire week of the trip and
sure.
noticing where things were made. And I was learning a few things about the brush segment, which, I didn't know, like, where the filaments come from, how they're put together, who's
Oh yeah, sure.
whatever, even about the American companies. And so then the tariffs come and they've added an enormous percentage. We're up to 54% total on
Mm-hmm,
tariffs from China and 25% back and forth across the border between the United States and Canada.
mm-hmm.
That's my understanding of where we are at right now as we record this. It's April 8th at 1:35. You got to put the time there because the way Trump
Right.
changes his
It
mind,
could change by the time
it
we're
could
done
change.
recording.
We'll check again after lunch.
No.
Because even this morning he's threatening another 50%, which would put
Hmm.
it at 100%. And so there are a lot of dealers that have asked me, like, there are American companies, are they going to go on tariff? And the answer is that the part of their product that is made in America will go on tariff, but otherwise, no. If it's made with components,
Hmm.
made in America means made in America with components that are made in America. It's 1-0 Tigers. Made in America means made in America with components that
Yeah.
are origined in America. And there's not a lot of options for that for bristles.
Yeah.
Not to mention the entire supply chain is right now centered completely. It's built in China. They're making all the filament in China. That
That's
there's
an interesting point because I immediately think of most of us who are listening to this are familiar with Worcester and Worcester,
right.
Ohio, and Purdy, and we just think, well, they're American brushes. But I don't know to what extent we know how much of the wood is coming from Canada and the
That's right.
bristle coming from China, and
And
and all
so
that.
as we're sitting here, it's a Tuesday. I'm doing the final edit of my blog, which will go live on Thursday. And in there is
Mhm.
some pictures of brushes that we've been collecting, just from my database of the last few weeks.
Yeah,
You could imagine the group that I'm working with, we're constantly looking at brush labels and applicator
right.
labels, et cetera. And uh, the vast majority of them that make any effort to, sort of go American proud, they do it with, you know, assembled in America,
Yeah, yeah,
with international components.
yeah.
There's made in America means your fabric is made in America, your core is made in America, your glue is made in America if it's a roller.
Hmm.
Made in America if it's a brush means your filament, your handle, your shims, your ferrule, the glue, everything is all made in America. And that just is not going to be the case. The fabrics, and the filaments, we talked about the uh, brushes we were talking about before,
Hmm.
but the fabrics on the rollers and those are currently coming from Asia,
Yeah, yeah.
primarily China. From my understanding, there are some exceptions to that,
Hmm.
but that's where they're going to be coming from, so, for the foreseeable future. And so, whatever the tariff is, it's going to impact your brush that much. And so if the tariff is on a brush that's got its filaments, its rollers, its ferrule, and its manufacturer is coming from
Hmm.
China, I think you're going to see, very well close to 50%
Yeah, yeah,
inflation.
huge,
You're
huge
going to see,
impact.
yeah, you're going to see an
Yeah.
enormous, enormous impact. Again, I don't know exactly. Oh, that's a nice plane, double plane. Look at that. Nice. You're going to see this enormous impact. I don't want to be so bold as to say 50%. I don't know how tax law,
Right.
taxing
And how
authorities
it's
work,
going to shake out.
it's
And then
but
our
it's going to be
manufacturers, and are
enormous.
they going to eat, some of the margin or?
No, they're
Yeah.
and here's the thing is that first off, they're not going to have any ability. The tax will exceed their profit margin.
Hmm. Hmm.
Let that sink in
Hmm.
because the government's cut on this will
Yeah.
far exceed the profit the manufacturer makes,
Right.
the profit the distributor makes,
Hmm.
and the profit the retailer will make. And so I don't know exactly what's going to happen to the prices of brushes and rollers, except to say that it's 100% certain that they are going to go up very significantly.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely.
And not just the price, though, there's other aspects that are deeply disrupted here. And so, take, for example, an American company like a Worcester or a Purdy.
Hmm.
They sell brushes, I'm sure, in Canada. I don't know the market up there like I do up here, but
Right.
we assume, right? They sell brushes. They take them out of their warehouses.
Yeah.
Here, I'm sure there's warehouses near where you live in Michigan. There's probably warehouses in Wisconsin, all along the border there. They're not keeping stuff in two, three, four locations. They're putting it, pardon me, they put it all in one location. They ship it across the border when they need it. It's been a free
Right.
trade zone
Hmm.
for 25 years, 20 years. And so now all of a sudden, the dealer on the other side of that, which is an American dealer buying Noir, which is a Canadian dealer buying Worcester, and I'm
Hmm.
picking these names at random, just to be clear, I'm not working for any of these companies,
Yeah.
right? Uh, an American dealer of Noir or a Canadian dealer of Worcester is about to face a very dramatic price increase. That one's going to be 25%,
Right. Right.
right? It's whatever you send across the border, it's going to be 25%. And so that alone would be enough, I think, to make changes likely in the distribution models. But when you consider that on top of the actual tax itself, the effects of this tax have been a terrible anti-American sentiment has built
Hmm.
among the Canadian people. Yesterday, I spoke to three Canadians in the course of my business. Stakeholders in this industry. These are not like friends of mine that I'm just chatting with.
Yeah.
These are people in our space, and I'm talking to them doing business,
Hmm.
right? Uh, and I started each of those three conversations by apologizing
Yeah.
because I feel like I want them to at least know that whatever political disagreement the government of the United States has with how much taxes Canadians pay to us, I'll
Hmm.
leave that for the governments to argue.
Right.
But I find the Canadian people to be fabulous. I don't want
Ab-
them to be the 51st state. I'm quite happy with them hanging out in Canada. They're doing
Yeah.
fine. They're keeping us safe up there. Guys
Right.
got
Right.
Canadians in her family. They're freaking cool people. Like I don't know why he did all of that, you know. And so he started all that. Now they're pissed. Now
Yeah.
we find out that it turns out that they're not as nice as we thought they were. They're just as angry people waiting for us to come
Right.
along and pop the bubble. And so he freaking did it, which of course is a joke, Canada. But
Yeah.
he freaking did it. He came and he pissed them off. And so how many Canadian companies have you seen? And like the big thing on the news that I've seen is like the Canadian companies pulling American liquors off the shelf.
Right. Right.
And because that's big dollars, that's trillions, right?
Yeah.
Billions and billions and trillions.
Hmm.
And excuse me, Canadian companies have pulled like American clothing brands and stuff like that. You've seen some of that on TV.
Yeah.
Well, the paint dealers pulling the brushes off the peg hooks is probably not going to make the news, but you
Right.
got to figure it's happening, right?
Right. Because they're trying to retaliate in any way that they
They're
can.
trying to retaliate, and
Yeah.
even if they're not being so bold as to say that I'm going to take my American brushes and burn them in a bonfire,
Yeah.
even if they're just saying I'm going to sell them off and I'm going to buy some domestic manufacturers.
Right.
And so I find it likely, considering that, and here, I don't know anything. I haven't spoken to dealers about this, or it's not like I've
Hmm.
polled the Canadian,
Right.
independent channel. I just find it likely from these circumstances,
Yeah. Right. Talk
right?
about the Canadians being upset right now. So my wife and I are planning an RV trip this fall to upstate
Nice.
New York, and so from Michigan, I'm kind of planning the trip. And I said, well, I'd like to go through Canada,
I was going to
and,
say you
and
could cut the corner there if you
yeah, yeah,
like.
cut the corner, and not have to go around Cleveland. I could stop in and say hi to Heidi Pets, on the way through.
Yes.
But um, and so I told my wife that right away. She's like, I don't know. I might be embarrassed being in Canada. I
You
thought,
know,
well, we're tourists.
I uh, I advise these two chapters by fraternity in Connecticut. I know I've told you
Yeah.
about them. And so the boys at UConn are doing their formal in about 2 weeks, I think.
Hmm.
And before any of this bullshit had started, they just thought it was a great idea to boogie up to Montreal. Not uncommon, by the way, for people who are from New York Metro, as I am, people from New
Yeah.
England.
Hmm.
Very common to vacation in Canada. Guy and I have vacationed in
Sure.
Canada twice in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so they have this formal planned to drive up to Montreal together, big meals together, dances, parties, whatever together. And at the meeting last night, I gave them all a little, sort of 2-minute reality check.
Hmm.
That right now the border crossings uh, are challenged
Yeah.
by the strain between the two countries, and you should not cross so much with, not cross with so much as a joint, a bottle, a cup of
Yeah.
wine,
Right.
nothing.
Yeah.
You should check the status of your you should check the status of your date's immigration status. Don't
Hmm.
assume anything.
Right.
And when you're there, because of anti-American sentiment,
Hmm.
don't stick out.
Yeah.
This is not the time because, at other times, you might have been 20 or 30 kids. I don't know how many they are. I guess with their dates, 40, 50 kids.
Yeah.
You might have been 40 American kids, and they might have just looked at you and said, they're just a bunch of kids, let them go.
Yeah. Just
But
goofing off. Hmm.
right, exactly. But now, because of that sentiment, which has been brought on by Trump,
Hmm.
right? Nobody else, there's nobody to blame for that. We don't have to
Hmm.
be afraid to talk about the politics of that. He caused that.
Yeah.
Whether he did it
Yeah.
by intention or stupidity, we don't know. But he caused that with his 51st state and stuff like that. That's just an inappropriate thing to say.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so I find that all of this is likely to, create an enormous disturbance
Hmm.
in at least the markets for brushes, rollers, and other applicators, right? So that's the roller refills, the roller handles, all of
Yeah.
that stuff.
No, all the tools too.
I would expect the tools. I don't have
Yeah.
any, look at that, another error. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I don't have any expertise, and I'm not working in that segment right now, so I don't have
Hmm.
any access either.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and I do know that there are some knives that are made in the United States just from companies I've met at the All Pro Show and shit like that.
Yeah.
But where are they getting the steel from?
Right.
For the blade, for the tang, for the handle? Where are they getting all that from? The plastic? Because if that's coming in from China, then
Right.
okay, it won't be the full 54%, only be, but it's going to be something, dude. You know, uh, a, a top of the line like a Corona or a Purdy or Worcester 2.5 inch, 3 inch professional brush right now is 25, $30.
Right.
That's where we're starting.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so is it possible that that reaches $40? I I find that in fact probable. I'm only wondering if it's going to
Yeah.
go higher than that.